Well, hello and welcome back to Ravenwood Acres, and today is episode 7 of Between the Lines, and we are going to kind of revisit a common topic in this channel, which is emergency preparedness or just preparedness in a whole. And as you see there in the title, why are Americans so unprepared for disasters? And we'll stay focused on natural disasters, just not to get off on too many tangents or paths here. Let's focus on natural because they tend to be obviously the more common ones. I'm going to put some statistical data up here in the videos, and then maybe or down below. But I found two resources that I'm going to be using primarily for this, and one is the an American Review research article that uses two studies, one from 2009 and another one from 2011. These were surveys that were conducted on nationally, and then there were some more focused ones in these small community groups that they surveyed. The other one is a article I found over, it's from September of this year. It's published over at dsnews.com, and the survey was done by Wells Fargo and Company, by IPSOS, and an insight analytical company, and they conducted over 4 days, and there was a total of 2,226 respondents. They have some pretty interesting data there. It is not as detailed, as, of course, as the American Review research article, which is a peer-reviewed article if you care to. And I will definitely put that down below. There's a lot there, and it's fairly scientific in some spots. And if you're not into statistics, which I am not, some of it is confusing. But I was able to pull some decent data from it after reviewing it. So just to start off, right, well, one of the areas in the 2000, so fewer than 26% in the 2009 survey, and the 2011 survey was 20% surveyed feel they were not very well prepared or not prepared at all. So out of those people, there's quite a few of them that think they're some sort of prepared, right? That it can be subjective, of course, and perception. We'll talk about that here in a minute, and that definitely has something to do with it. There is some discussion of demographics, and that was present in a lot of their, like predictable survey results. So kind of talk some of that, which I found a little weird. So the individual thought were definitely considered themselves less prepared or not prepared at all were those that fell into the minority, female, poorly educated, unmarried, risk-averse, dependent on others, but unlikely to comply with government directions, and who are renters and have not experienced, this is a good one for perspective, right? Have not experienced a disaster where they've had some sort of consequence, right? I mean, you could experience one and have no consequences, and it may not have really any impact on you, on your decision making, as far as like, hey, should I put together an emergency kit? Should I put it together a power outage kit? Should I make sure to keep my vehicle full or over half a tank? Those type of things. And then, of course, it was the opposite for the people that thought they were more prepared, tended to be white, male, educated, married, risk-tolerant, self-reliant, compliant with government directions, a homeowner, and who have, this is another key part of perspective, have experienced disasters. So one of the researchers over here actually said that, yes, the demographics were present, but as he was saying, he actually thinks it's more about people's preferences and perceptions drive them to prepare or not. Therefore, they examined 3 broad categories of variables, which preparedness equals, or preparedness, environmental, personal characteristics, preferences, and perceptions. So the Wells Fargo article we'll talk about a little bit. They claim in this, like I said, a 2001 survey that 4 in 5, or 84%, Americans live in an area that has experienced some form of natural disaster in the past 3 years. Definitely the community that I live in, or at least back when I'm back in the States, has experienced multiple 100-year floods in the last decade or two. So not quite a 100-year flood anymore if they're, yeah, anyways, that's true. So I could say yes, I have. And then they said more than half, or 54%, live in areas that have experienced severe natural disasters, like hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, wildfires, and earthquakes. So yeah, my community where I live in the States is affected by floods, but where I live on Ravenwood Acres, we're up out of the valley. We personally won't have to deal with flooding on our property, maybe landslides potentially. And then the roadway when we go into town can get flooded out. Luckily there's a couple alternate routes, but I'm digressing. All right. So I bring those up just to kind of to help you guys understand this. I'm going to go into some of the questions on the American Review of Publications Administration. So one of the tables covers why people do not prepare, and that's kind of the question group, right? So there's a national sample, and then there's a small community samples, and how people assess themselves. Then this is kind of an interesting category: how local officials assess citizens, right? And then the small community one is how people assess themselves, and then how local officials assess people, right? The citizens, I would assume. So I'm not going to go over all of them, but one of the areas I kind of thought was probably a reason why, because I've met people like this, is the thing was, I would rather not think about bad things happening. You all, if you're watching this, have you met somebody like that? I bet you have. Maybe you are someone like that. Well, I hope if you're watching this video, maybe you've broken past that, and you're trying to move past your fears of this and actually taking action, because that's what we're about here, taking action. So 14.2% of the people surveyed in the national survey said yes, they would rather not. Now the second one down below that, I quite honestly think they should have kind of grouped those two together. They don't think it's going to happen to them. So it's kind of that normalcy bias, complacency, I don't want to hear bad things. I don't want to think about bad things. No bad things are going to happen to me. Great. It's good to be optimistic, but you got to be real too. If you live someplace that is definitely highly prone to natural disasters, you can't bury your head in the sand and not pay the consequences eventually. You might get through, maybe. I don't know. You want to try those? Play with those odds? I wouldn't. Okay. And then one of the categories is they don't want to do, that one was 23.5%. So the public officials think that 35% of the people just don't think it's going to happen to them. And the small group one, 31% of them thought that. But only 2% in the small group, small community, I keep saying small group, but small community, like maybe a rural community, only 2% thought it wasn't going to happen to them. So maybe they were a little more, their perception was different. So, all right, let's go back to that demographics part that I talked about. This part I found a little fascinating. We're going to talk about Hurricane Katrina next. So before I wrap this up, I could probably go on for an hour about this, and I don't know if I would keep anybody past the next few minutes. So I find it interesting. I don't know the rest of you are. We'll see how much engagement I get off this. All right, the non-compliant, and I don't misconceive that with any current situations, but if you're, sheriff's deputy is, driving around your neighborhood, and I'm going to use an example for this one, the real world one, and on the loudspeaker saying, hey, there's a wildfire coming towards your community, you need to evacuate now, get out now. Are you going to ignore them? I don't know. So I was traveling, and I was staying in a hotel room, and I don't watch the news a lot, mainstream, media, on the TV. Very rarely anymore these days. It helps with my blood pressure, but but I do read a lot, so that's how I get my information. There was a fire in Ventura, California, in the Ventura County in California, and I have a friend that lives there, still lives there, and I sent him a message. Hey man, are you affected by this fire? He's like, what fire? I'm like, well, I saw on the news there's some wildfires in Ventura County, or somewhere right outside the city. And he lived out on the outskirts, and next thing you know, he's messaged me like, hey, we're getting out. The sheriffs just came through the neighborhood on the loudspeaker. He went outside right after he got out, and after I messaged him and saw the smoke, and was like, oh no. And it was close. And so he started grabbing his kids and stuff and started packing up his truck, and they evacuated. Shortly thereafter, the sheriff's deputy came through, they evacuated, and spent the next 2 weeks living in a hotel outside the danger zone. Fortunately, their neighborhood did not burn. Some other neighborhoods in that area did. But, it just goes to show you, like, are you not going to listen to that? I don't understand that rationale. Hurricane Katrina. My personal experience, and it's indirect, was with that, is I was stationed in Fort Hood at the time when Hurricane Katrina made landfall. My unit, which is an aviation unit, deployed in support of some of the post-landfall evacuations and, support, food and water, emergency supplies, that type of thing, to New Orleans. And I did not deploy because my supervisors knew that my wife was due to, give birth to my son at the time, or fairly shortly within a 1 to 2 week window there, right? And so they chose to keep me back just in case. He was actually born afterwards, after they returned, because they were actually not there very long. They went there, they got their job done, and they came home. So I got a lot of firsthand accounts from them, pictures and video, and what a mess. But there's some pretty hard to get into exact numbers, but there's people that estimate about 150 to 200,000 people did not heed the evacuation warnings. A lot did, but a lot didn't. And I'm not talking about, because this is discussed in this paper, but like I said, we don't have enough time to go too much in detail on that. I'm not talking about, and it does say that, actually, I'm going to go to it right now. Where did it say? It says, I know it was there. Are dependent on others, right? That one category, they're dependent on others. That could totally be those people. A lot of the people in the hospitals that my coworkers, landed their helicopters on the roofs and evacuated people out over and over and over again, were bedridden. Some of them, very few nurses stayed back. A lot of the staff left. The hospital staff left, and they were in bad conditions. A lot of them, yeah. But so they can't evacuate themselves. People without cars, whether it's the inability to have a car due to financial means, or it's inability to obtain a license because they have some sort of disability. So there's a lot of people falling. Let the first responders rescue those people. Don't be that able-bodied, American that has the means to take care of yourself. Don't be that person the first responders need to risk their lives to rescue. And I know if you're watching this, you're probably not that person, but you know people. Talk to them, beat it into their heads. It's what I've been doing for years. I will argue a little bit with the data here, because it says that, like I said, educated, married homeowners. I know plenty of people in that category. They might consider themselves prepared because they got a little bit of food in the pantry, or maybe they buy an extra case of water here and there. But do they have 2 weeks of supplies? Do they have, like I was talking about earlier, do they make sure they keep their gas at least halfway? If you live in an area that evacuations are normal, wildfires, hurricanes, ocean, if you live near the sea, especially the Pacific Ocean, you live on the West Coast, and you live within the areas of the Cascade Subduction Zone, and you don't have a plan to get out of there quickly, you're going to be fish food. So there's additional findings on the Wells Fargo one. Was 30% respondents have a go bag in case of disaster. That's 32%. That's pretty good. 40% do not, though. That's what I was talking about with the gas, half tank. 46% have an emergency kit to include supplies that will last several days after disaster. That's pretty good. It may be one of those little tiny kits. I know the ready.gov that I've mentioned before talks about a 72-hour kit. Most states that I've researched, at least in the Pacific Northwest, all promote a 14-day, which is a much more reasonable emergency preparedness plan. I would obviously, you should shoot that as an initial goal and work your way beyond, but that's not what this is really about. And then 54% say they have 2 weeks of emergency food supply. I'm telling you, if you eat at home more often than you eat out, like say you only occasionally once a month, twice a month, maybe you take the kids out for pizza or whatever, you have a decent pantry and you have a deep freezer of any sort, whether it's like side by side or something like that, you probably have 2 weeks of food. You may not like what you're eating because it might be boring and bland, but you probably have 2 weeks worth of food. Now, will it spoil prior to that? Do you have non-perishable, or do you have a way to run your refrigerator if you lose power for 2 weeks? That's where you get to those next levels, right? All right. And then 38% report their important documents are not easy to find. This is a big one. If you guys are a survival podcast follower, Jack Spirko, he talks about this all the time, having these books of this stuff. I have a physical book of this stuff. I have copies, paper copies in a fireproof bag. And then I have several thumb drives with all those documents scanned to offsite. One on site, but it's in an outbuilding. And then I have one with me here in South Korea, so that's pretty good covering. So, and then I stored one at a family member's house. So they're cheap. Thumb drives are so cheap. You can put a lot of documents on them now too. So anyways, I don't want to go too long, but I already went longer than I was expecting. As I said, throughout the video, I should have some links in there, or some statistical data up, just to make this a little more interesting for you. If you're tired of listening to me, you can read that. And I will, of course, have everything down below. Hey, look, if you like what you hear here, please hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this with your friends, comment if you have questions. If you got other recommendations, methods you'd use to get your family member and friends, coworkers, whatever, to start thinking about, stop burying their head in the sand and start preparing for the what ifs, the actual statistical chances that they're potentially going to get impacted is pretty high depending on where you live. So, and then, don't forget to check out my other social media links, which are also linked down below, and have a great day. Thanks for watching.